I think I'm the resident therapist.
Yeah, because
I
that
am. Yeah. And
it's
that's listen, that's what this is, right? This is by and large, this is, pro bono therapy work, trying to
mhm.
help people avoid the same ridiculous mistakes that I made in life. And that's the fair bargain that I made, right? My life, the last 8 years, has been a road of recovery in so many different ways. And the fair bargain that I made is give it freely to the next man or woman.
Hey everybody, this is Lorelia, and in today's episode of the Never Lose a Deal podcast, I want to introduce you to my special guest, who is Mike Russell. Now, you're going to learn a little bit about Mike Russell. He is in the real estate industry. He is a real estate broker, but he has a very interesting story that I really think would really give you some insight of what it is like to be a person who was raised and had a background in the real estate industry as well as being a owner of a real estate brokerage. So he's going to talk about some of the hardships that he has faced, and I don't want to share everything with you all. So I just want you to check it out, take a listen, and I hope you learn a lot from Mike's story. Okay, see you in the episode. Hey, everybody, this is Lorelia Brown-Phillips, host of the Never Lose a Deal podcast. And this is the podcast for real estate investors who desire to learn more about creative financing so they can do more deals and expand their portfolio. So today I have a special guest that I'm going to introduce. And this is going to be a real treat because normally I talk a lot about, ways that you can build wealth and create some type of real estate portfolio for yourself using different financing methods. But Mike today is going to share some of the setbacks that some individuals, real estate investors, I'm going to let him share his story of things that a lot of times are not planned in life. And so I'm going to let Mike go more into that. So how are you doing, Mike?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm honored to be here. So thank you for the invitation. I'm an open book, so I'll share anything you want to know.
Okay. So, Mike, as I, mentioned to the audience, Mike is a owner of a Century 21 franchise, one of the original franchises in, I believe, Connecticut, right, Mike?
Massachusetts.
Massachusetts. Okay. And so, Mike, if you can tell the listening audience a little bit about your background and what it is you do and your story that has to do with foreclosure.
Yeah, sure. So I've been in and around the real estate business my whole life. Real estate investing is kind of in my genealogy, I'd say. The wisest real estate investors in my family go back generations. We got dumber as the generations went by, it would seem. So since I was 19 years old, I've worked with Century 21. My father bought a Century 21 franchise when I was 19, and that kind of directed what I would do with my life. I was working on a fishing boat prior to that, so I liked the look of the white collar much better than the blue collar, and so I just jumped in and did that. Really started in this business as an administrative assistant. That was really the best education I ever got in the real estate business was answering the phones and witnessing what other people did in this business. And then I kind of held every position there is to hold in a real estate company from the beginning, and became a real estate agent. I was the marketing director for a little while, and then eventually became the owner of the franchise. Um, 2008, 2009 obviously hit really hard, like it did for a lot of people. I think my mistakes in real estate investing and really with money in general was I led with my ego, is what I really did. And I had partnerships where everyone in the partnership kind of led with the ego and was driven by that top line number, and more without any real fiscally responsible attention to the investments that were being made. Just wanted to be the ones that won the deal. And that didn't lead anywhere good, and ended up having some properties foreclosed on, had to short sale some assets, ended up filing personal bankruptcy, corporate bankruptcy. And those were some of the darkest times in my life.
Mm.
And so it's been a while since that was the case. I've turned my life around quite a bit, make much more reasonable choices now. Money, I used to think that money was what would make me feel okay inside. And then I kind of reached the belief and understanding that the amount of money that'll make me feel okay is $5 more than I'll ever have. And so I kind of accepted that, and kind of got to a place in my life where I believe today wholly and completely that wealth is going home, going to bed feeling satisfied, and waking up feeling happy.
Exactly. Take us back to, because I know my journey with real estate is being an investor, but I noticed you mentioned dad owning the Century 21 franchise. And what I'm familiar with Century 21 is that, you are a real estate agent. I know you said you started as an admin. So take us back during the time when you started to face hardship. Was that you being a real estate agent at your franchise, or was like more on the investing side? Because I know you said you, reading your bio, you lost properties or what have
Sure, both. I would say, I mistook cash flow for wealth. That's what I did, without ever considering for one moment that cash flow could diminish and, and get to a place where it simply wasn't enough to carry the overhead,
you.
whatever that was, whether it was properties where tenants stopped paying the rent because of
Mm.
an economic downturn, or at the time when 2008 hit, we had grown to 7 offices across the state,
Oh,
uh,
wow.
which meant something like 10 photocopier leases, 10 additional people on the payroll. And the overhead was just too much to handle when, that was the worst economic downturn this country's ever seen. And revenue in every facet of real estate went down 65%,
Mm.
and simply wasn't able to, cover the nut, as they say.
So did you lose some of those franchises during that, hard period of time?
Consolidated. I had to short sale some buildings because we had some cross collateralized notes that were
Mm,
taken across multiple buildings.
mm,
We entered into forbearance agreements, and at the time, I had no idea what a forbearance agreement was, but I did know that the cross collateralized note would go from a $9,900 payment down to $4,200. And at the time, that felt really attractive because it meant that we could swing it. But the reality is, in a forbearance agreement, which I didn't understand then, was an actual amendment to the terms of the note. In that particular instance, on those commercial properties, it amended the note where the maturity date was actually 24 months out.
mhm,
So what had happened on that cross collateralized note? That note was 1,300,000 or 1,400,000, and by the time it matured, that bank had decided to get out of commercial lending altogether. So they were unwilling to refinance it. I couldn't go out into the market and refi that note
mhm,
because the value of the assets had plummeted 50%.
mhm,
And they didn't represent sufficient collateral as the market tanked
mm,
in order to refi. So we owed significantly more money than we were able to collateralize.
mm,
And we short sailed one of them. They
mhm,
took the deficiency balance in the short sale and attached it to the other property, which only brought that balance high enough. And, I tried everything under the sun to save that property, but they eventually just foreclosed on it. And that was our primary place of doing business.
So, interesting enough, myself, I invest in real estate notes, Mary, on the residential side, not a commercial side. The thing that, I find out is that you were in the forbearance agreement, you were making the payments,
Yeah.
and I get that the values, didn't support what was owed. They weren't open to at least, I don't know, restructuring the note, whereas, okay, you can still make payments, but, you know,
No,
yeah, okay,
at that time, it was a unique situation. The bank was called Millennium BCP. It was a
okay,
Spanish bank.
all right.
And they had made a corporate decision to leave the United States and all of their commercial notes. And so they were actually actively in the marketplace offering 15% discounts to
Mm,
current lien holders to get out of the note. So
mm,
because we had entered into that forbearance agreement with a new maturity date on the note, they didn't have to offer us anything. They just said, "Hey, the note's due." They called the note. It was up.
yeah, yeah, and, like I said, I'm new to the note space, only a few years, but talking to investors who were during that time, they did say that that was a very lucrative time because they were buying notes at a very big, deep discount. So
Absolutely.
clearly, your situation is an example of
Sure. No
note
question
investment.
about it. Yeah, absolutely.
So now take us, give us the journey of, okay, you're now in this period of time where you're losing things. Did bankruptcy become part of the strategy for
Yeah,
you to,
sure.
okay. So
Yep.
tell us a
Um,
little bit about that.
I would never do it again. It created a 5-year stretch in my life where I was unbankable in the traditional banking world.
Mm,
Um, I didn't. I, I was naive. It was a ripcord for me. It looked like the easiest path, which for a long time in my life had a tendency of choosing that path, the easiest one, the one of least resistance. I didn't want to own up to my obligations. I wanted to be free of them. And it was a tremendously challenging experience. The corporate bankruptcy was really the toughest thing, kept me up at night for the better part of a year.
mm,
Is what it was. It was a reorganization, both of them. I didn't file Chapter 7 in either case. With the corporate bankruptcy, it was a Chapter 11, which is a cure and maintain plan, which means that I had to report to the U.S. trustee every month, um, cash flow, projections, and an editorialization of the actions I was taking in order to prove the business would be viable and would be able to maintain its 5 years of payments to the bankruptcy court.
mm.
Um, Fear of loss far better motivator than opportunity to gain. I was scared to death. I was scared to death, and I have never been more motivated in my life, and I highly doubt I ever will be,
Mm.
as I was scared to death of losing everything, and I did everything in my power to make sure I didn't.
Yeah, I mean, I know bankruptcy it could be possibly, yeah. I mean, it devastating thing, but I guess the silver lining in all of it is that it does, because, like you said, you did a reorganization, so it wasn't to sell any assets; it was to allow you to protect what it is that you did build for yourself. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is accurate.
Mhm.
But what it does is it closes all potential lines of credit anywhere for an extended period of time.
Mhm.
And that was a horrible existence. All these years later, and how easy it is. Because banks are either the most amazing tool in the world or they're the most horrible people in the world in our minds, right? That's how we feel. And today, to me, banks are the most amazing thing in the world. Without banks, I wouldn't be able to make moves and do what I do.
Mhm.
But I'll never take for granted again if it offered me anything of value. It's the gratitude I have today and how much I value my credit score and the things that I've worked to get back to where they need to be. But boy, back then, I was not a fan of banks. I did a lot of blaming.
Mm.
There wasn't a lot of accountability in my actions until later in life would I really find that. But during the time, I kind of blamed everyone and everything else.
Yeah. Yeah, that's got to be devastating. A person probably could look at your, background and say, "Oh, he had parents who were involved in real estate." And so, at least he had some type of roadmap. But even there, I mean, you did have like you said, your dad, started, the franchise in Connecticut,
Sure.
but you still faced hardship, because nobody could have predicted 2008.
It's in hindsight is nobody's fault. It's my own actions that led to that. You
Mm,
know, I should have never been given the keys to something that valuable at that
mm,
time in my life. I wasn't worthy of them, and I didn't know how to handle it. I was not going to be a sound steward for anything at all.
mm,
And so it's nobody else's fault. It's not the market's fault. It's my own poor decisions and choices that led to these problems. I stepped into a fray that should have been an easy pathway for me to be successful for the rest of my life.
mm,
And I promptly mucked it up.
mm.
I did.
But the good thing is now we can go into hope
Yeah.
for hardship.
Yeah.
So
That's
how
right.
did with everything that happened,
Sure.
the bankruptcy and the foreclosures, tell us a little bit about hope for hardship.
Yeah. So that's really the driving force in my day to day now, right? And so the reason that this thing was created was it never would have been created if not for my own turnaround in life
Mm,
and me getting to a place where I was accountable for my own actions and was able to look at what I did closely. And what keeps me doing it is bearing witness to and playing a small role in the turnaround of others' lives. Because struggle is not unique. We all face it. Every one of us faces struggle. And what I have been afforded and have the benefit of is the great experience that I've had being in and around this business for 30 years. And so that really blends well with what's very personal to me. And that is, listen, when I went through this, I created some collateral damage in my family that lasted the better part of a decade,
mm,
and I had to work tirelessly to mend that both financially and relational within my own family. And that's why it's so important to me. And I have a great understanding of what people are going through when they face these struggles in life. Financially becomes emotionally, becomes relational. I have a great understanding for that and a great empathy for that. And
mm.
so that's what makes this a motivating thing for me is to get that reward of helping someone get back on the right track. And so that's what I do in this hope for hardship entity is I help people hopefully avoid things like foreclosure and bankruptcy because there are always ways to pursue other avenues prior to deciding whether or not bankruptcy is really what you need to do. I think it's a great tool in America. And
Mhm,
in some cases, it's required.
mhm,
But oftentimes it can be avoided. When it comes to secured debt, anything in this country, whether it's a boat, a car, a house, any kind of secured debt, the financing entity always wants to work with the consumer. They never want to. But what we tell ourselves, and I was guilty of this, my dining room table had 2 years of unopened mail on it
mm, mm,
because I didn't think never in my wildest dreams would I believe that the very entity that is threatening my home and my livelihood was the entity that could help. I didn't believe that. But now I know it. And now I help other people understand it. And I help them put together strategic, effective assistance applications to find out what programs they qualify for. Banks look at this in two buckets when there's secured debt. There's the retention bucket. There
mhm,
are assistance options for homeowners that allow them to retain the property. And then there are also assistance options if they don't want to retain the property. And I have a great understanding of what all those are and how to qualify for them. And so that's the work that we do here is we help people find out what options they qualify for by constructing accurate um, assistance applications and helping them gather supporting documentation and stay engaged through the process.
Yeah, that is you're so like the emotional impact that people go through is very devastating because a lot of times, we get in our head. For many years I've wrote a book on, helping people repair their credit and rebuild their credit. And one thing that I have noticed, Mike, is there is a big emotional piece that is part of it. A lot of times I've told clients in the past that, I think a lot of times is embarrassment. it's like you said, people thinking, okay, this is the entity that I owe. How are they going to help me? And I tell people all the time, I've told clients, the same mind that got you into this situation, a lot of times, whatever that may be, the person themselves, a lot of times it's not the same. You're not going to be the person who could possibly help yourself. And that's where, organizations like yours come
Yeah.
in, where people need to now lean on, the help of somebody else. How would individuals find you? Like, are you working with bankruptcy attorneys, or, you're working with bank institutions? So how do they
Sure.
find out
Yeah,
about your
absolutely. No, we have an extensive network. We work with so many different professionals across the country, but the consumer themselves can call me direct, 508-501-9214. They can go to our site, hope, the number 4, hardship.org, learn a little bit about my story and just reach out to us that way. Listen, the message, in my opinion, should be that there's no shame in struggle. Every one of us faces it. The shame that we feel, just a bullshit story we tell ourselves.
in our
It's
mind?
not real.
Is
It's
that
not real. It's just not. Struggle's a chapter in life, right? It doesn't have to be the whole story. Every one of us goes through it. There's no judgment. There's yet to be a story that I've heard that I judge.
exactly? Um, what I did want to ask you was that with going through your bio, you talked about certain states being high foreclosure states. And I noticed you had New Jersey.
Yeah,
Jersey
sure.
being one. But the thing is that, I always New Jersey is a homestead state. So I always tell people it's kind of a hard state to get foreclosed on. And I don't know if you're familiar with some of the the state laws that New Jersey put in place. I did an episode some months back of helping homeowners um not lose their home. So, what are your thoughts about that? States that are now putting things in place um, to help homeowners so they won't lose their home.
Well, I think the tough reality of this is, right, is the homestead really all it does, from where I'm standing anyway, in my experience, is it protects equity in the event of a bankruptcy,
Mhm.
but it doesn't protect equity much beyond that. The reality is that it's I don't really know how to determine why certain states have a harder time. I really have been unable to determine why that is.
Mhm.
And there are all sorts of states that offer funding to help pay off arrearage that's past due. The problem that we're facing right now, like Massachusetts, all the states used to have something called half a home affordable fund. There
Okay.
was great funding during COVID. Massachusetts got $2 billion, and so many other states did as well, where you could literally get out of this state fund up to $50,000 to pay off arrearage past due amounts. We got so many people through that. The problem is they run out of money. They've been out of money for a year and a half. And so I've yet to find state laws that make it impossible or even really very challenging for a collateralized debt to not be at risk of being repoed or foreclosed upon. There really aren't. There are very limited programs and state offerings or federal offerings that do that outside of bankruptcy, which is really just a temporary stay on the foreclosure process. So I don't see a lot of state programs that are effective in stopping or even delaying a foreclosure. The most effective thing people can do is get proactively engaged, pick up the phone, and talk to their lender. Every lender wants to work with you. Along the lines of what you're talking about, it's the emotion that keeps people from doing that. Like, here's a perfect example, right? I can't stand talking to Comcast about my account. I'm ready to kill them when I'm on the phone with them. I cannot stand it because it's my account, it's my DVR that won't upgrade. I'm pissed off at them when I get on the phone. The great value that we offer is there's a total emotional barrier. I'm not pissed off when I talk to your bank about your struggle. I'm not angry. I have no frustration level. I understand sales is how the world goes round. And so it's just a function of being charming, complimentary, and cooperative with the person on the other end of the line.
Mhm.
That's tremendously easy for me. If I was the one in struggle, that would not be easy. I would be pissed off because every bank is always missing a document. Coincidentally, they're missing a document that you sent them 3 times last week in 3 different ways. As the consumer, to hear that about my own loan when my own home and my own kids and everything else is at risk, and I'm feeling these real life stresses in the moment, I can't stay cool on the telephone. I don't have that ability. None of us possess that ability. I can't even do it with Comcast. What I offer is an emotional barrier where I'm not burdened by their past, by their present, and their future circumstance. All I know is how to communicate effectively with a bank, how to not let emotion enter the fray, and how to completely have my expectations reasonable in the fact that I don't expect the bank to be tremendously cooperative or come across as very competent on a regular basis. They just don't. You know, these big banks, these big servicing companies, they don't communicate well interdepartment. And so it's a frustration, it's a struggle. So that's really the best service that we provide is we stay in touch on a regular basis and we make sure that everything gets to a completed status and we don't get angry and frustrated on the phone while we're doing it.
Yeah, and that's why definitely organizations like yours is needed because this is what I found, you know, that for individuals in New Jersey, like I said, that new law they put in place, the Home Preservation Act or whatever. Now, this is what I've told clients of mine. No, the bank is not going to tell you. You're right. Like if you wait for the bank to say, "Oh, go down to your courthouse and file, the paperwork or what have you," but organizations like yours would let the homeowner know, "Hey, this is what's in place." Because I do know in New Jersey that if that paperwork gets filed, that does put a halt on things.
Right.
I've never been involved in the process, so I don't know, but I know
Yeah.
it does a halt. And now I guess the bank has to work with nonprofits to be able to, I guess, work with this homeowner because I know it's like nonprofit um associated,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
yeah. So
And yeah, there are a litany of ways to delay the bank.
yeah,
And in the laws that you're talking about. And the stuff that you're talking about is very common in judicial states. So there are
yeah.
2 types of, there's judicial foreclosure states, non-judicial, right? And
Mhm,
so New Jersey is a judicial state,
mhm,
which means that we can submit things like emergency foreclosure stay.
mhm,
We can record documents with the courthouse that will delay and buy time.
mhm.
Um, but all you're doing is buying time.
Yeah,
And that's the reality of it is you're just buying time because the ultimate solution lies with um, can you conjure up a story that the lender will sign off on in order for them to offer you some assistance. And that's really the and what so many people, we lose sight of it, right, is look, buying time, there are unique cases where buying time is called for, and but every all the time you buy, your payoff is increasing.
yeah. The clock is ticking. Yeah,
It's costing you, the juice never stops running, right? And so all the time in the world that you buy, all you're doing is ultimately decreasing the amount of equity that you have in the property. And so I've never been a proponent of buying time unless there are unique situations where they have to do that. Whether we just met a couple, they're 82 years old, failing health. He just had a heart attack.
mm,
Their auction is scheduled for January 9th. We went
yeah,
over to the house and they were hoarders and they had so much stuff in the house and they're just completely ill-equipped and unprepared for foreclosure to enter their lives. Their actual life is at stake. Like they may not make it through this. Instances like that, hey, you know what, let's buy some time. We care a little less about what the equity position is in the property. These people need a roof over their head. You know what I mean? There are levels to struggle,
yeah. I
right?
was gonna ask you in a situation like that, I mean,
Yeah,
not that you have to share the details because I'm
yeah,
thinking in the 80s, you're definitely a retiree. And
yeah,
like you said, you are putting things in place to slow things down with the banks, but what's the solution? Because, if it's
Yeah.
lack of income, I mean,
And that's one of the big problems that we're facing, right? Rents are so high, right? And these guys, I walk into this property with one of my colleagues here, and we're just, and it's exactly what you would expect in a hoarder's house. There's one pathway,
mm,
2 feet wide, around the entire house, years of collecting and things like that. And there are mental health issues at play here in this country that are real and are consistent, and make it impossible for people to see what's coming, right?
mm,
And so the solution in that instance is they are on Social Security. They each get benefits. Their net income is about $2,500 a month. That makes it possible to place them in a 600 to 700 square foot, 2 bedroom, 1 bath apartment. The very idea of that, as we broach that subject, is something that hasn't even begun to compartmentalize in their mind. They look around at everything they have, and that's the honest conversation that I have with people. Honestly, I spend a lot of my time trying to help people get out of their own way. And that's the reality, is they are in their own way. It hasn't even dawned on them that all of the stuff in both the yard and the home is not going to be theirs much longer. And they're going to have no place to put it.
mm,
Getting people to a place where emotionally they can break that 30, 40-year bond of a way of living and get to a place where they actually accept, we are going to have to leave this home.
mm,
And that's the hardest obstacle to overcome. I wish I had someone that could go back to me at that time in my life and sit down and be just brutally honest with me and say that to me. I need you to understand something. The sooner you get to a place where you accept that you are leaving this property, and then understand that there are only two choices. You are going to do it on the bank's terms, or we're going to do something now and you're going to do it on your own terms.
mm,
And that right there is the decision-making paradigm that ends up being broken in these situations. People refuse to accept that they are going to have to leave this property. And because of that refusal, they bump up against the auction and they are out of good options.
mm,
Every bank in America has this arbitrary, I've yet to figure it out, arbitrary figure of, if your auction date is less than 37 days away, we will no longer offer you any assistance options.
mm.
And they don't tell people that, you know? And so people oftentimes, we don't talk to people until there's an auction scheduled and it's 3 weeks away. Your level of options there is tremendously limited. The one benefit is this completely unreasonable appreciation in real estate values over the last 4 years, which isn't real, really, long term. But what it's done is we've met so many people just this year where they haven't paid their mortgage in 2 or 3 years, but they sell their property and they walk away with a bag. Unheard of. We had a woman who had her property, hadn't paid her mortgage in 3 years, sold her property and walked away with a check for $196,000, more money than she's ever had in her life.
Oh, yeah, because of the appreciation. Yeah.
That's, you know what I mean? That's not real life. Every time in the history of real estate, if you fall behind on your mortgage, you have negative equity. You don't have the ability to sell for a good profit. But because values are so high, that it's made that possible. And that's oftentimes what we have to help people get to that place is, look, the difference between being foreclosed on and selling for a profit is immense, because having to figure out a new housing situation with 6 figures in the bank is a hell of a lot easier than having to figure it out with no money in the bank.
Well, now I'm seeing some light at the end of the tunnel because, like you said, one, the emotional, like you said, bearing of and the attachment of,
Yeah.
this is my home and I may have to leave, but at least the silver lining could be that you do have a lot of equity.
Right.
And so this is the outcome that could happen, which may leave you in a better place. And that's why I was wondering about that because I know me as a real estate note buyer, I'm buying notes, at a certain,
Yeah,
at
yeah,
a certain,
yeah, yeah, right.
I
It
know I'm
goes-
not going to get the equity. So
right.
that's what I tell her, like the equity goes to the homeowner.
That's right.
It doesn't come to me as the bank,
That's right.
I
Yeah.
only buy at, the actual, the UPB,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
yeah, the unpaid
It's,
balance. So
it's
I don't,
really it's
yeah,
a remarkable time to be behind on your mortgage. There's such a thing. You know what I mean? And listen, it's not my advice to stop paying your mortgage, but
yeah,
it's crazy to me. It blows my mind. I say it to my partners and my colleagues all the time. Like, this is crazy.
yeah,
This is nuts. Never before could you go 24, 36 months not pay your mortgage and then be like, ah, you know what? I'm going to sell and get $200,000. It's crazy.
yeah. Well, I don't know. Like I said, the rules in Jersey are just, like that's always seemed to be the case because with New Jersey being a statutory state, I mean, you could like you could push the foreclosure for, like you said, a year or 2 years or
Yeah.
what have you.
Right. Yep.
Um, I know we're going to wrap up.
Yeah.
We're at 30 minutes, but how do you find time? Because I mean, that seems like it's a lot in itself. I
It
mean,
is. Yeah.
I'm assuming you have people who run that and then also have your brokerage, So are
Yeah.
you
So
not involved in one and fully involved in another?
yeah, I'm less involved in the day to day of my real estate brokerage now. I'm fortunate enough to have people I trust who handle most of the day to day with the real estate brokerage, and I spend the vast majority of my time in this nonprofit, and
Yeah.
I'm blessed to be able to do that. Really, I'm blessed. It's I wake up happy.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have a therapist on staff to deal with the emotions of the
I'm
people?
um I'm kind of I think I'm the resident therapist.
Yeah, because
I
that
am. Yeah. And
it's
that's
heavy.
listen, that's what this is, right? This is by and large, this is, pro bono therapy work,
Yeah.
trying to help people avoid the same ridiculous mistakes that I made it.
Mm,
And that's the fair bargain that I made, right? When I really, my life, the last 8 years has been a road of recovery in so many different ways. And the fair bargain that I made is give it freely to the next man or woman.
exactly. Are you only in Massachusetts or are you all over the country?
We'll do this anywhere in the country.
Okay. Okay. So the listening audience, Mike, Mike's gonna give his information again. And of course the information will be in the show notes, but understand he can help you, all over the country. So Mike, once again, can you tell us your information for Hope for
Sure.
Home?
Yeah. You can call me direct 508-501-9214. You can go to our site, hope, the number 4hardship.org. Just fill out a inquiry there and we'll reach out and we'll do a little intake call. We operate off a basic service agreement. It's very simple. It just outlines our expectations of you and it tells you what we're going to do. And those expectations, honestly, are stay engaged when we ask for supporting documentation provided in a timely manner. It's time to kind of like pull up the bootstraps, get in the fight, play an active role in our attempt to get you some assistance. Without the people, we can't do this work.
Well, of course, the one thing everybody's always going to want to know, is there a cost associated with
There
it?
is not. No, there is not a cost.
Okay. Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, did you hear that? No cost? Wow. This is great. All right. Well, thank you so much, Mike, for
Thank
having
you.
a conversation with me. Like I said a few months ago, I had a conversation about foreclosure that happened here in New Jersey. So once again, this is Lorelia. If you want to learn more about me, you can go to www.neverloseadealpodcast.com, and I will see you in the next episode.